dismissed, forgotten, even shamed. But their stories still echo through the pages of Scripture. In a world where men wrote the history books, these women shattered expectations. Their names were erased. Their actions were questioned. Their motives are misunderstood. But God saw them. Tamar, the righteous deceiver. In Genesis 38, we meet Tamar, twice widowed, trapped in a culture that only valued her for producing sons. Her father-in-law Judah promised her justice, but never delivered. He withheld his youngest son, leaving her with no future, no options, and no voice. So she acted. She disguised herself as a temple prostitute and slept with Judah, who, when he found out she was pregnant, demanded she be burned alive. "Bring her out and burn her," he shouted. But Tamar had proof. "I'm pregnant by the man who owns these," she said. Judah was forced to face the truth. She is more righteous than I am. Scripture doesn't condemn her. In fact, she appears in the genealogy of Jesus Christ, a woman who risked everything for justice when the system failed her. Rahab, the spy who saved a nation. The city was doomed and everyone knew it. In Joshua 2, we meet Rahab, a prostitute, living on the edges of society. But Scripture shows us something more, a woman of bold, unwavering faith. When Israelite spies came to Jericho, she hid them. She bargained for her family's safety. She declared, "I know the Lord has given you this land. Your God is God in heaven and on earth." This woman, labeled and judged by others, recognized God's power before a single battle was won. The scarlet cord she hung from her window became a lifeline and a symbol of faith that defied her past. She wasn't just saved, she was honored, named in the lineage of Jesus, and counted among the heroes of faith in Hebrews 11. Hagar, the seen one. She called him the God who sees me. Genesis 16 introduces Hagar, an Egyptian slave, forced to bear Abraham's child, then cast out into the wilderness by a jealous Sarah, abandoned, pregnant, alone. That's where she met God. He found her, he heard her, and he gave her a promise. In a world that treated her like property, God gave her dignity. She's the first person in Scripture to name God, El Roy, the God who sees me. Her story still whispers across time to the unseen and the forgotten. You are not invisible to God. Jael, the unlikely warrior. When Israel's army faltered, God chose an unexpected hero. Judges 4 tells the story of Jael, not a soldier, not an Israelite, but a tent-dwelling woman from the Kenite tribe. When Sisera, the enemy commander, fled the battlefield, he found her tent and thought he'd found safety. "Come in," she said. "Don't be afraid." She gave him milk, covered him with a blanket. And when he slept, she drove a tent peg through his skull. Scripture doesn't condemn her, it praises her. "Most blessed of women be Jael," says Judges 5. In a time when women were expected to be passive, Jael was a warrior, and God used her to deliver a nation. Mary Magdalene, the faithful witness, history has often called her a prostitute, but Scripture never does. Luke 8 tells us Jesus cast 7 demons from her, and from that moment on, she followed him faithfully. She helped fund his ministry. She stood at the cross when others ran, and she was the first to arrive at the empty tomb. The apostles dismissed her story as nonsense, but Jesus chose her as the first witness to the resurrection, the moment that changed history. In a culture where women couldn't testify in court, God chose Mary Magdalene to testify to the world. The Samaritan woman, the unexpected evangelist. She came to draw water at noon when no one else would be there. That's where Jesus found her, a Samaritan woman with a complicated past. He broke every social rule just by speaking to her, and instead of shame, he offered her living water. She ran back to her village and said, "Come meet a man who told me everything I've ever done." She had no title, no training, no reputation, but Scripture says many believed because of her testimony. She became one of the first evangelists because God used her story, not in spite of it, but through it. Phoebe, the forgotten leader. Romans 16:1-2. Paul writes, "I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a deacon of the church in Kentree." That word deacon is the same used for male church leaders. Paul also calls her a benefactor, a leader and supporter of many, including himself. Most scholars believe Phoebe delivered Paul's letter to the Romans, not just carrying it, but reading and explaining it to the early church. One of the most important theological documents in history, carried and interpreted by a woman. Phoebe wasn't a footnote, she was a leader. These women weren't side characters, they were chosen. Tamar, who fought for justice. Rahab, whose faith defied labels. Hagar, who saw God and was seen. Jael, who struck down a tyrant. Mary Magdalene, first to witness the risen Christ. The Samaritan woman, whose voice brought a village to faith. Phoebe, the leader who carried truth to the world. Their stories challenge tradition and expand our vision of who God calls and uses. What if we read Scripture with fresh eyes? What if we listen to these women the way God did? Not with judgment, but with understanding. Subscribe to our channel to discover more stories like these, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that God sees beyond status, beyond shame, beyond the surface. These women weren't forgotten, they were chosen, and so are you.